recording this. So from a pastoral standpoint, I had mentorship as well. And that was important because any of you that have ever been to a church or spent time in a church, that obviously, depending upon your faith and denomination, there's a great oral tradition that comes from that as well. And because of my surroundings, a lot of times you'll hear people talk about, am I a product of my environment? Am I a product of my biology and genetics? Is it 50-50 or a combination thereof? Well, my environment was heavily influenced by orators. And so I grew up on a subconscious level having these things kind of seep into me as I was coming of age. I wasn't aware of it, but it was definitely rubbing off. And there were a lot of people from the political landscape, the social activist landscape, the religious landscape that I was exposed to as a child, because my second father was very active in the civil rights movement, and he was also the lead pastor of a church for well over 30 years. So I had a lot of indirect influence, and I saw a lot of things from the perspective of the pulpit and not necessarily the pew. And then there would be meetings before big events. And so I was privy to those conversations because my second father would allow my brother and I to just be a fly on the wall, because he wanted to teach us what's involved in leadership and what's involved in creating change and fighting for social justice. And so all these things played a part. And then once I came into my early to late teens, I began to engage in actively developing myself in front of a room. So I was doing things like debate, I was doing things like speech and presentation prep, and so I got exposed just to a lot of different things. Fast forward, I was at a meeting. Actually, I was asked to come to this meeting, and the meeting was for the graduate school network, because I was in graduate school, and so there were all these schools under the umbrella. There was a medical school, business school, nursing school, div school, drama school, you name it. I don't know, 12, 13, 14 different schools, whatever it was. And they wanted someone to chair the entire network. And that person would have to obviously speak to congregants, and we would have to be doing these events. And I have no idea why I was asked to go to that meeting. I don't know why they asked me to be the chair, but I knew that I had to say yes, because I was trained to take responsibility if I'm going to be a change agent. And that was really my first experience coming out as a communicator in a formal sense, if you will, someone that was charged with the assignment to go forth and speak and to communicate and bring life into a situation, and obviously have strategy behind that. And that's where it started for me, really formally. And then over the years, I started to do more and more of it. And when I was a professional actor, a lot of times if I was shooting, especially on the streets of New York, people are not shy about coming up to you, because a lot of times our trailers are on the sidewalks. So we spend most of our time in the trailer. We're waiting for them to set up the shot. We're not really on the set that long. So we spend a lot of time just kind of waiting around to get called for the next shot. And a lot of people would just come up and ask me questions. And then I started to be invited to come to a school. Would you come to the school and tell your story? Would you come to here and tell your story? And so I started speaking inadvertently on a regular basis. And I saw that especially for young students, that it was really giving them insight into the life of an artist. And I was able to de-glamorize it and give them a greater picture of what that lifestyle is like. And then the next thing I knew, I was on Broadway and I was working with Denzel Washington. And during our time on Broadway, it was very transformative for me, because I had never, at that point in my career, I'd worked with a lot of actors, but I had not worked with anyone that was that big of a star. As great of an actor as Denzel Washington is, he's also one of the biggest stars in the world. So I'd never been around that. And working with him every day and seeing the craziness. Oh, is that better? And seeing the craziness that was around us, because we're all in the cast. So we okay, great. So we were it was like being with the Beatles or Elvis or the Jackson 5. Like it was insane, the pandemonium and the number of people that were constantly coming at us, the cast, but they're really looking to come at him. So we were kind of like uh, protecting him, if you will, and watching him interact with the crowd and spending that kind of time with him. And then we did a film together shortly after that. So I was with him for about 6 months between the Broadway play and the movie that we did. So I just learned a lot, and I began to ask myself a deeper set of questions about how I was going to impact the planet. As an artist, I had a voice, but it wasn't 100% my own voice because I was always telling someone else's words. I was always playing or portraying somebody else's script or somebody else's character. And as much as I love that, there were some things that were missing for me from the human development angle, from the personal development space, from the healing space and the empowerment space, because I don't have control over the story or the script. And so I remember after doing the film with Denzel, I did another film where I had to portray a Iraqi war vet. And the Iraqi war vet, his hand had been blown off during an attack, and he was a pianist, and so he couldn't play the piano anymore. So he comes home and he's stressed, and he's an alcoholic, and he's a chain smoker, and he's going through all this stuff. And I just remember how emotionally draining that film was. And I was asking myself during the course of the film, like, how is this making me a better human being? The story was important. The story needed to be told, but it was very taxing on me spiritually. And because of my time with Denzel, I started to seek out other mentors. And one of those individuals was another powerhouse by the name of Mr. Les Brown. Some of you may know who Les Brown is, some of you may not. Les Brown, if you don't know him, I would highly recommend that you YouTube him and just watch his stuff. He's one of the best speakers in the world. And if you really want to understand the power of speak and what it means to transform someone, just you can pull up you deserve, it's possible, it's not over until I win. If you just pick up one of those three, you'll get it. And one of his most seamless is Live Full, Die Empty. You can find any of those on YouTube. And so I became his apprentice because I was in a room with him one day and I watched him throughout the course of the day. And I saw people start in one place and they ended in a completely different place. And I looked at the power of the spoken word on the human spirit, and I was so transformed by that. And I saw the difference between what I did as an artist and what he did as a speaker. As an artist, you may come into a theater space with me for 2.5 to 3 hours, and I can transport you. And then afterwards, you're asking where are we going to go to dinner? That was very entertaining. It was very moving, and it doesn't stay as long. Sometimes it does, but a lot of times it doesn't. And what I watched him do was create this space and this process and this environment through the power of communication where people could be transported and then transformed. And it could happen within the time that we are together. And so for the next 2 years, I was with him on the road, and I was doing whatever was required because I wanted to learn this skill. A lot of people thought, well, you're a professional actor, of course you know how to speak. And I was like, no. And he said, no, that's not true. And I agreed, because speaking is a very different muscle. It's a very different art form than performing. Performing is very different. And so learning and being under his tutelage while I was also packing boxes and working tables and selling his products door to door and getting coffee and ironing shirts, whatever he needed done, I was doing it. I just wanted to be in that environment. And more importantly, I wanted to understand his mindset. How is it that you've been able to generate well over $50 million with your communication skills? I wanted to understand that. So being with him and being in the limousines while he's making deals, and then eventually, because of how I showed up as a student, I started to get stage time. I would get 3 minutes, I would get 5 minutes, I would get 8 minutes, I would get 10 minutes. And he only would put or bring people with him on the road that he would allow stage time with. So you had to earn your way into that space. And it wasn't a lot of time, but it was better than nothing. And so that's where I began to fine tune my skills. And I learned how to combine what I got from Mr. Brown as a professional speaker and what I got as a professionally trained, classically trained stage and film actor. So those things come together in a very unique way. And the more I started to speak, because of what I learned from Mr. Brown, I became a professional speaker. I started to train and do presentations for major corporations around the world. And I started to meet other people and other world-class orators and speakers that I used to watch on TV. And so it was a whirlwind of transition from performing on a Broadway stage to performing on a corporate stage. And so all of that brought me into a space of, wow, okay, this is something so much greater than I could have imagined. And the responsibilities is really, really huge, and it's important, and the power of the word. And so the more I began to speak, the more people would ask me these questions. And because of the work that I was doing, I was so focused on whatever the next assignment was that I really didn't take a lot of time to think about how to put it together in order to give it to other people that would want to learn. So I ended up doing some coaching inadvertently. I would get called in on I did trials for attorneys, so I would help coach the clients before they got on the stand. I would work with professionals, dentists, doctors who would have to give a presentation at a conference. I would coach them up on how to present and all of that. So I started just inadvertently doing these things, and I realized over time, hey, there are a lot of people that would like to improve their communication skills. There are a lot of people that just want to be better in terms of how they come across. And regardless of the venue or the arena that you want to get mastery in, there's tremendous value in learning just some of the tenets that have stood the test of time in my 20 years as a professional communicator, speaker, trainer, and all of that. It can translate so well in whatever it is that you're doing. So what I would like to do before we get into some of the things I want to gift you all tonight, if you would, you can unmute yourself or you can type it in the chat. What are some things that you would like to improve on, some areas that you would like to get better in when it comes to your communication? Don't everybody speak at once.
Hey, Tom Raviel here. How are you?
Yes, sir.
I would like to get some insight on how to best read my audience. Like, what are the cues that one should look for if they're being well received, if they're over their head, and so on like that?
Great question. Okay. It's really good. It's a really, really good question. Okay. Anyone else?
Hey, Jeffrey Brown, how you doing?
Hey, what's up, brother? How you feeling, man?
Long time.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You know, I've done Toastmasters, and you know, I'm just trying to be a better storyteller.
Ah, okay.
So, you know, anything I can do to better tell the story, and you know, keep that audience, you know, right with me.
Absolutely. That's great. That's such a good one. Such a good one. I love it. Excellent. I'll do one more. I'll do one more. You can jump in.
Hi, Ed. It's Gretel.
Hey.
For me, I guess leave people touched, moved, and inspired. Like being able to be there, present with them, and have that confidence where you just leave people just touched, moved, and inspired.
Yeah.
To take on their life.
All right. Oh, this is definitely a part of it for sure. It's good. These are really great. Really, really great. So a couple things I want to touch on. Number one, building rapport. So some of this is going to be obvious, and you probably have heard most of it before when it comes to building rapport, but we're just going to do a quick refresher on it. 3 very simple things in building rapport. Okay. Number one is you have to be comfortable in your own skin. You cannot build rapport with someone else if you don't have it with yourself. And I have seen people, they try to approach people, they try to build rapport, and they're so uncomfortable in their own skin that they make the other person uncomfortable. So think of it like this. If you're meeting someone for the first time and it's a dating setting and a person approaches you, what are you more likely to respond to? Do you respond to the person who is stammering and nervous and sweaty? They just look completely discombobulated and they're trying to get your attention to ask you out on a date. Or the person who is calm, cool, and collected, doesn't mean they're not nervous. It just means that they're comfortable enough in their skin to just simply approach you, give you a nice compliment, and perhaps strike up a conversation. Obviously, the second one is going to be a lot more appealing. I'm not saying the first one doesn't have success, because if you talk to enough people, somebody going to give you the time of day, all right? But we're just talking about the dynamics of it. So that's the first thing, is that you must have rapport with yourself before you can have it with other people. So you want to be comfortable in your own skin. If you have anxiety or nervousness, it's okay. You can even acknowledge that depending upon the purpose of what you're wanting to build rapport for. People love transparency, honesty, authenticity. They're going to be much more responsive to that. So that's number one. Number two, don't focus on what you want to say. Focus on what you would like to know. A lot of times people approach, or they come up to somebody in a situation and they start pitching. How many of you all have ever had somebody come up to you and throw their business card in your face? You ever had that in your lifetime? I'm sure you have. How many of you all took that person's business card and said to yourself, oh, I'm definitely calling you? Exactly. Because you're like, yo, you're coming at me, you're throwing your card, you didn't ask me even my name, and you're giving me your card and your pitch, and you don't even know my name, you don't even know what I do. So a lot of times people are so excited, and I appreciate the enthusiasm to connect and to get themselves out there, but they're not asking any questions. They're just thinking about what to say next. And so the second aspect of it in terms of building rapport is think about what you would like to know about this person or situation that you're coming into. If I'm going into, let's say, a job interview, I'm not thinking about what to say. I'm thinking about what would I want to know about this organization that I'm potentially going to be partnering with and giving my blood, sweat, and tears to for the next 10 years, right? If you're entering into a relationship, it's not about me talking about my salary and my car and my apartment. No, I would like to know who this person is, what their value system is, what do they enjoy. I would like to get to know this person before I start to introduce more of myself. So that's the second aspect. Most people are not accustomed to being listened to. Most people are accustomed to being talked at. So that's number two. Number three is give yourself permission to be completely transparent and authentic. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to spill your entire life story and throw up all over the person. It just means that you're willing to be transparent and authentic within the moment. Hey, it's been really, really good to learn some things about you. I appreciate you taking some time out. I got to tell you, I was a little nervous when we first started the conversation. I found you particularly attractive. That's a dating example. If I'm in a job setting, hey, listen, I appreciate you all giving me the time and the opportunity to be evaluated as a potential candidate. I have to tell you what I saw from where you're sitting. From what I see from where you're sitting, I see a lot of positive things in terms of the environment, the culture here. I know that I can add some things to it. And whether we work together or not, I just want to say I enjoyed the time here. So there's something that is refreshing in the person that can be in their space. So there's a level of confidence when you can be comfortable in yourself, and you know you have flaws and you're not perfect. There is a level of appreciation when you can take the time to ask questions and actually listen and get to know someone. What do they always say? You got two eyes and two ears and one mouth. What does that mean? You talk twice as less as you listen. So you listen a lot more. And then third, having the authenticity and the transparency to just talk about the experience of the present moment, whatever it is, good, bad, or indifferent, so that people can feel like, wow, this person was really here and present and they were being themselves. And that's so rare. So those are three just quick secrets for you when it comes to building rapport that I find it's shocking to me that a lot of people they just don't do it. They don't, because they're so focused on themselves and what they want to say, what they want to get from the situation, that they're not really being fully present, and they're not really looking at how can I add value. That's really the underlying question when I'm talking about building rapport is how can I add value to the dynamic? How can I leave this person and this situation better than how I found it? If you move in that spirit, it's virtually impossible to have a negative encounter, if you will. And I've been in situations where I want to give you a good example. So I was I was asked to come into this highly intensive environment, and here are the circumstances. Okay, circumstances were brand new television series being developed for ABC, and I knew the producer, I knew the director, I had heard of the writer, but I had grown up watching the producer's television shows. Big producer. And I remember thinking to myself, this is the first time I've ever gone into a situation like this where I'm going to be in a room. I have no idea what the room is going to be like. I don't know if it's a big room, a little room. I don't know if I'm going to have props. I don't know. I have no idea what I'm walking into. I just know that they want to meet me because I'm being considered for this lead role in this new television show. So I remember walking into the room and all these thoughts started racing through my head because it was the first time I was in that type of situation. And I was overwhelmed because I wasn't trained for that. I was trained as a professional stage actor. I was not trained to interview big wigs and brass at TV, at TV networks for lead roles in television shows. Nobody had prepared me for that. And so by the time I had gotten past my overwhelm, I was already auditioning, and I have no idea. I have no idea what I said. I don't know what I did in that audition because I just wasn't present. And when the audition was over, I acknowledged that it probably didn't go that well. And I made a joke about it and I left the room. And I remember the casting director calling my agent and saying, hey, yeah, he did blow it, but they really liked him because of his honesty. And so that actually got me another opportunity on another show. But it was the ability to just be honest with what was happening in the situation. And even though I fell flat on my face, I still had enough self-confidence to acknowledge that. All right. So those little things can mean a lot over time. All right. So that's the building rapport. Now, reading your audience. There are levels to interacting and connecting with an audience. And the way that you access the levels is through one of two things. Either you're going to have to go out and speak in front of hundreds of audiences, and that will help you develop the levels, or you're going to have some serious coaching. It's going to happen either way. There's no other way it's going to happen. You can't. Mr. Jeffrey Brown was talking about Toastmasters. That's where I got my start. Mr. Brown told me you have to do Toastmasters. You got to get your CC. And as much as I love Toastmasters, it's a group of people that you become familiar with. And even if you go to different clubs, it's the same setup. It's not the same as when the stakes are on and the stakes are high. You got to do what you got to do as a presenter, whatever the situation is. And so the best teacher is always going to be experienced. Coaching, what coaching does is that it accelerates and it helps you to anticipate a lot of things. But even coaching can only take you so far. It can prepare you, but at the end of the day, you have to be in action mode. So when you talk about reading an audience, there are levels to it, because number one, you're there obviously to deliver a message. Number two, you have to know and learn how to listen to the listening, because your audience is listening to you, but they're listening to themselves more than they are you. Because you got to understand that when people are listening, like you all are listening to me now, but as I'm communicating with you, it's being colored by what you're saying to yourself about what I'm saying to you. So me as a speaker, I have to be aware of that. I have to understand that. I know some of you came into this space on this Zoom with some preconceived notions. I know some of you came in wanting to see what this was and who is Ed? What has he got? Is there any value to what he's got? Is he going to be blowing smoke up my butt, or does he have some skills? And you're kind of sizing me up at the same time. And then you're dealing with whatever other baggage you have about yourself as a communicator, as a speaker. So all that's being colored, and it's going through a filter as I'm communicating to you. So I know better. I know that what I'm saying to you, the essence of it may not necessarily get to you on this first go around. I get that. So you have to understand that in terms of reading your audience. And then third, you have to understand how to move from what you want to say to what they need to hear. You have to learn how to move from what you want to say to what they need to hear. And these are all levels, okay? They're all levels that you come to through preparation, proper guidance and instruction, understanding the context. I'll give you an example. So I have a prison ministry, and I have spoken in women's prisons. I've spoken in men's prisons. And I remember going into the men's prison, and I'm a very different speaker when I'm in the men's prison than I am in most other instances, because it's a different animal. And I can't talk to that dynamic the same way I talk to a group of entrepreneurs or a corporation or what have you. It's a very different dynamic. So when I go into that space, not only do I have to read that audience, but I have to understand at a very visceral level, spiritual level, emotional connection level. I have to get to the root of what it is that's going to move them. It's going to penetrate the walls that they've built up. It's not easy. And I do it because that's where I get my training. That's how I sharpen my craft and my skill, because I know if I can connect with a prison audience, I can connect with anybody. So, but I only learn those things through doing them over and over and over and over and over and over again. So reading your audience, yes, we will spend some time on that. There's a process to it. And I've worked and coached with clients who have had to go before an assembly or before a group, and I've let them know, because I can anticipate based on how I'm coaching what the audience's response is going to be. And that's only because I've spoken in 24 countries around the world in front of, I don't know, 300,000-400,000 people. So I have a very good sense of how people respond based on your energy, your posture, the messaging, the languaging of it, and all of that. And that's why I talk about the coaching aspect of it, because I can anticipate a lot of things and then put you in a situation where you can handle it. You can adjust as it comes your way, because you have the power of anticipation. So Jeffrey Bound talked about being a better storyteller. So it's one of the most important things. One of the most important things is telling stories, because stories disarm the listener. Stories give people a familiar ground that we all know, because most of us can relate to being told stories when we were kids. And I can remember Peter Gruber was talking about his career in film, and then he talked about some business dealings that he had. But he was centering it around the power of story. This is one of the occasions when I was with Mr. Brown. We were at an event. It was Tony Robbins, Peter Gruber, Les Brown. I think Brian Tracy was there too. We were in Canada. And as Peter was telling the story, I'll never forget the story, because he said, hey, Howard Schwartz, the former CEO of Starbucks, was approached by a gentleman who came into his office, and he told him a story. And he said, listen, he said, I want you to imagine all of these beautiful inner cities across America, and there are no Starbucks in any of these inner cities. And I'm going to share with you how a Starbucks can be a focal point for people to gather in community. And we're going to play the music that is specific to that demographic. And we're going to have an atmosphere that is welcoming. And because we're going to provide a service and fill a void that exists, what it will do for the business and the growth of the business will be exponential, because in these markets that I am talking about, we are literally responsible for not billions of dollars, but trillions of dollars that is being spent on an annual basis. And the gentleman was so good at telling the story that's what Howard Schwartz bought into. And then he went on to say, he said, listen, we're going to not only have Starbucks, but we're going to have movie theaters, and we're going to put them in these inner city communities so that people can have a place to gather in a nice movie theater with memorabilia on the walls and Starbucks available at the movie theater. Like he was painting this vision. Well, that person that was telling that story was Magic Johnson. And as you all know, he went on to own goo gobs of Starbucks and movie theaters, and has become one of the most successful businessmen who made that transition as a superstar athlete into business that the world has encountered. But it all started because of his power to tell a story to Howard Schwartz. Now, is Magic Johnson the most articulate person in the world? No. Does he know how to conjugate all his verbs? No. Do you think that mattered? What mattered is that he came and he showed up as his most authentic self. What mattered is that he had a vision. He had the ability to tell a story and to convey that story with conviction. Because if you don't believe it, no one else will. And so Howard Schultz, I said Schwartz, Howard Schultz bought into that story and that vision, and that's how that business and that partnership was formed. So yes, we are definitely going to be working on cultivating stories and the power of story when we're working on Saturday. And finally, Gretel asked confidence. I want to touch, move, and inspire people. Well, here's the starting place for that. If you want to touch and move and inspire people, then you got to touch, move, and inspire yourself. See, the power of communication, it starts first and foremost with you. There are people, and this is the danger of individuals who cultivate the skill without having the core. There are certain people who know how to communicate and they're master manipulators. There are certain people that know how to communicate and they have no character. They're completely immoral, unethical, and they use it for ill will and negative intention, right? We all have encountered individuals like that, either personally, we've seen it in our environments. Some of us have had to deal with it in our workspace, in our career space. We've all encountered that. So that's not what I'm talking about, but that's how powerful the skill is. This is why certain people that are effective communicators, listen, I know you've heard this a million times. Hitler was a master communicator, masterful communicator. He was able to move and inspire people to action, but it was evil. So he had the skill. That's how powerful the skill is, but he used it for ill, okay? So what I'm talking about is when you're wanting to touch and inspire and motivate other people, it's about you being able to do that for yourself first. You have to be the message that you bring. So if you're not being the message that you're bringing, it doesn't resonate the same, especially now, because now I do believe it's a little bit harder for people to be fooled. They still can be fooled, okay? They still can be fooled. I'm not saying they can't be fooled. It's just a little bit harder because people can look. They can see how you're living your life, how you show up. They're going to look at you physically. How do you look? What is your energy like? What is your energy signature, which we'll talk about on Saturday. So they can sense a lot more, and they can also do their own research. They can see what kind of work you do and all of that. But it's about starting first and foremost with how do I show up in my life every day? And am I living my life in such a way that if I were to share it with someone else, they could be inspired by it? Because if you're not living your life each and every day in such a way that if I tell you what my daily routine is, you look at it and say, wow, how are you doing all of that? Well, then I'm not really living an inspiring life. How is it that you're able to discipline yourself to do these things every single day, no matter what? See, if you can't say that about yourself definitively, then you're not living an inspiring life. So first and foremost, it starts with you. Then what you'll learn, Gretel, is how to put these components together. And when you put them together and you communicate from, so that was the third thing I wanted to talk about tonight. The most important place to speak from every time you communicate, the most important place to speak from is your core. Now your core, it has two meanings. Core is literally your center. So if I stand up, I say, this is my core right here, okay? This is where your breath is. This is where you breathe from. And if you ever watch a baby cry, if you've ever seen a baby cry, babies can cry all night long. Anybody got any children? Yeah, you remember, like I remember those weeks and months, much harder on the mama for sure, but I remembered it because we didn't get no sleep. And the reason the baby can be so voluminous incessantly is because the baby is speaking from the core. And when you speak from your core, it's an energy source that never runs out. it's a very organic, biologically sound way of communicating. A lot of people, unfortunately, they're not self-aware, so they speak from a different register. They don't speak from their core. Some people speak from here. Some people have a more nasally thing. They're up here. Some people are they're tight in their throat because they have a lot of tension and they're not aware of their tension, and they walk around and they have a certain kind of posture and they move because they're not aware. So understanding how to speak from your core, that's the physical aspect of it. There is a energetic and spiritual aspect of it, meaning you speak from the place where you are most grounded. You speak from your belief and your faith and your conviction. Now, there's another challenge. A lot of people, they don't know what they want. A lot of people, they don't really know what their belief system is. They don't know what their principles are. They don't know what they stand for. They've been so accustomed to other people telling them what to do, when to show up, when to punch in, when to punch out. They've been living up to other people's expectations. They've been living a role. Here's something I want you to think about. Who are you? Who are you when you are not fulfilling a role? See, we all have roles that we have to fulfill. Could be a role as an employee, could be a role as an employer, could be a role as a spouse, could be a role as a parent, could be a role as a teacher, a leader in your community. Whatever role that you have been fulfilling, my question to you is, who are you when all that is stripped away? When you are with yourself and by yourself, who are you in that moment? And so many people have grown accustomed to fulfilling roles. They're just going all the time. They love helping other people. They love serving other people. They love being needed. They love being able to be counted on. And they're very good at those things because it allows them to not deal with themselves. This is why you hear these stories of people, and you'll hear they'll say something like, I don't know what happened. They just got up one day and said, I don't want to do this anymore. And they walked off the job and they never came back. I don't know what happened. We were married for 22 years and my spouse looked at me and said, I don't want to be with you anymore. I didn't see it coming. I was floored. I was shocked. I don't know what happened. One day my parent was there and the next day they just left and never came back because people fall into a trap of living up to someone else's life or expectations. Now, I'm not advocating that people not disavow their responsibilities. I'm saying that people, they're not being honest with themselves. And so that's why that happens. So my question to you is, who are you when you're not being who you need to be for all these other situations and other people? Who are you when it's just you and you? Because the more you begin to get into that space, that is where your authentic voice is going to come from. That is where your centering will come from. And that's what makes you magnetic when you communicate. So that's an assignment for you to do between now and Saturday, is to spend some time in the mirror and really ask yourself that question, okay? Like really ask yourself that question. Who am I when I am not the roles that I have to fulfill? So quick story, and then we'll get out of here about how I use the power of communication to put myself on a career track, to be a full-time working actor, to do theater, off-Broadway, Broadway, film, and television in New York City for almost 10 years. I didn't have to wait tables. I didn't have to have a hustle job. I had the privilege and the pleasure to do what I love to do. And my life was of my making. It was my creation. So I was fresh out of school and I had just done a play. And I did a play with someone that ended up becoming one of my dearest friends in the world. Her name is Eve Ensler. She wrote a play called The Vagina Monologues. No, that's not the play that I did, but it's an incredible transformative piece. And if you know anything about V-Day, it is a movement now, and it's around the world. It is global, and its purpose is to stop violence against women. They have safe houses to stop female genitalia mutilation. They have other safe houses where young girls that are, instead of them being sex trafficked, they have a safe house for them to go to. So Eve Ensler is one of the most prominent voices in educating the world about women, women and their bodies and their self-image, and doing proactive work as an activist to really bring that to the forefront. So because of my ability to connect and communicate, I formed that relationship, and she's become one of my closest friends. She's the godmother to my daughter. So I had just finished that play with Eve, and I found out that Spike Lee was going to be speaking at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. And I was living in Brooklyn at the time, and I said to myself, I am going to meet Spike Lee. So this was probably about 2.5 weeks prior to him actually doing this event. And I remember, because I made that commitment, that my antenna were up for anything Spike Lee related. So if I saw him on a magazine cover, if I saw any story being written about him, if there were any books about his films, I grabbed all of them. I was just reading through them. And I came across an article, and in the article, he was talking about how he's shocked that so many people come up to him and say, hey, I want to be in your movie. And then he says, well, give me your resume. And he's like, none of these people have resumes. They just want to be in my movie. He's like, I don't understand that. So I made a mental note to myself, okay, make sure you obviously have your resume and everything together when you go to meet Spike Lee. So I remember it was the day of the event, and I got there 3 hours early. All right. This is the power of preparation, which we'll talk about on Saturday. Got there 3 hours early. And I saw how the room was set up. And I was looking at the podium where he was going to be speaking. And I remember I sat right to the right of the podium, because people tend to favor their right when they're talking to an audience. It's just a natural human tendency. So I made a point to sit where he was going to have to be looking at me the whole time. I was going to get into a subconscious mind before I actually approached him, right? So I remember I had my envelope there. I had my cover letter, my resume, and what he was doing was a screening of Malcolm X, and then he was going to do a Q&A afterwards. So the Q&A was going on, and somebody asked him in the Q&A, they said, well, what kind of actors do you like to work with? And he was like, great actors. Spike Lee is another person. He's not the most articulate person in the world. He doesn't use a lot of words. So you have to understand his speech pattern, his rhythm. And we're going to talk about speech patterns and all of that on Saturday. So I understood it. It was just funny because people were wanting him to give some long, monologue about the type of actors he likes to. No, he was like, great actors. So Q&A is over, and he's getting up. He's walking off the podium. He's getting ready to leave. And I can remember I got up and I started walking right behind him. So he's going, I'm walking right behind him. And I got the envelope in my hand. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, what am I going to do to get his attention? And I was like, ooh, what if I hit him over the head with the envelope? Like, that would be a memorable moment. He would remember me if I did it. And I was like, no, I can't do that. So he's walking. And as he's approaching the door, a gentleman walks in the door. This gentleman, his name is Roger Denver Smith. Roger was just up at Yale, where I graduated from, and he and I struck up a friendship while he was at Yale. He was doing a play in residence there. It's a play about Huey P. Newton. It's a one-man show. And so Roger sees me behind Spike. Now, Roger had worked with Spike a bunch of times, and a lot of his films. He was, if you ever saw Do the Right Thing, he was Mookie, okay, and Do the Right Thing. So he sees Spike. He's like, hey, Spike, what's going on, man? And he's like, yo, Ed, what's up? And so Spike turns to see who he's talking to, and he's like, and I'm like, hey, what's up, Roger? He's like, hey, Spike, this is Ed Blunt. Ed Blunt, this is Spike. Now, I got to pause here, because I want you to understand something, the power of intention. When you have a magnificent obsession, whether if it's to transform the world, to inspire 1 million people, to get your next promotion, to give yourself a pay raise, whatever your magnificent obsession is, whatever you are pursuing, it is also pursuing you. And see, we are senders and receivers when it comes to the antenna of the universe. So we're sending out signals, but we're also receiving signals. And I know that because of my obsessive focus with what I was doing at that time in my life as a professional actor, there was no other option other than for me to work. I know because I got there 3 hours early, because I envisioned the outcome, because I had worked on myself and I had prepared myself and I had trained myself and I had gone without for so long. I know that's why Roger Gambier Smith walked through the door at that time. At that particular time, he could have come in at any point in time. He came in when I was walking behind Spike trying to figure out how was I going to meet this man. So when Spike turns to say hello, I simply had the envelope. I said, "This, sir, is for you." And I handed him the envelope. And I'm looking him dead in his face. And he's looking at me and he's like, what is this? He said it just like that. Like, what do I look like to you? Like, what is this? And I said, you said that you only wanted to work with great actors, right? And he looked at Roger like, man, like, who is this? Like, who is this dude coming up in here like this? And I said, thank you very much. Have a great day. And I walked right out the door. Because sometimes when it comes to communication, people talk too much. You talk too much. You talk yourself into a situation, then you talk yourself right out of it. So understanding that sometimes less is more. If you could say it in 2 words, don't use 3. Understanding when these things are appropriate. There's so much that goes into the power of communication. Well, 2 weeks later, guess what? I got a phone call. Her name, Aisha Cooley. She said, Ed, is Ed Blunt there? I said, yes. She said, are you Spike's cousin or something? I said, no. She's like, well, he's got a role for you in his upcoming film, and these are the dates that you're shooting, and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, bam. I was like, man, this stuff really works. Like when you focus, law of attraction, I was like, yo, that's real stuff. That's how I got my first major film. That's how I got my Screen Actors Guild card. So I say all that to say this. The communication that took place between me and Mr. Spike Lee was all of 30, 40 seconds. It was not so much what I said, but where I said it from. It was not so much what I said, but how I said it. It was not so much me giving him a long list of my lengthy resume of 30, 40, 50, 60 plays and whatever else I could throw up on him. It wasn't about any of that. It was about moving in a spirit of clarity and confidence and authenticity, and then being willing to let it be what it is, having the confidence and the faith that whatever's going to come of it's going to come of it, and moving on. So there are dynamics to communication. There's dynamics to when to speak and when to listen. More often you're going to be listening than you're going to be speaking. So just wanted to share that story with you all. Wanted to give you all an idea of some of the work that we're going to be doing on this coming Saturday. For those of you that want to register, you can go to edblunt.com. That's ED, I'm putting it in the chat, edblunt.com. You can go there and you can register for Saturday's Presentation Power Intensive. I promise you're going to get so much more than just being a better communicator, because you have to get more in order to be an effective communicator. Hopefully you got some good stuff out of tonight. I appreciate you all sharing some of the things that are important to you. I promise that we will address them with more time and attention this coming Saturday. I look forward to seeing you there. I will send out the replay of this, so if you have other people that you'd like to invite on and think they can get value from what we're going to be doing on Saturday, you can certainly share this and encourage them to register as well. Have an awesome and amazing rest of your thriving Thursday. Happy 2020. It's the very first full week of the brand new year, of the brand new decade. We're going to make it something special. So I look forward to seeing you guys on Saturday. Again, go to edblunt.com. We'll see you soon. Have a great night.
Thanks, Ed.
You got it.
Tell me, do I need to be my own hero? Would you lay your life down? Would you give an arm or a leg? Are we gonna fight now? Maybe it's the world we're against. Is it our time now, right now? Or is it just me in the end? Is our future bright now? Tell me, is the dark seeping in? Are we alright now? Are we really breathing again? Is it our time now, right now? Or is it just me in the end? Will you come running when I scream your name? All around running and they're coming for me. Tell me, do I need to be my own hero? Will you come running? I need to know. Are we a fool or out all alone? Tell me, do I need to be my own hero? I don't know how I'm gonna do it, but I'm gonna do it with or without you.